Ladies and gentlemen, the Football Scoop podcast is back. I'm your host, Scott Roussel. I've got college football experts John Bryce, Zach Barnett with me. Today, I was hoping to get these guys on the line, talk a little bit about teams that we feel need to have a good season for one reason or another. Might be that they've had a couple of down seasons. Might just be there's a significant pressure point for whatever reason. And I really want to start with the Big Four, the Power Four, and maybe we can talk about any other teams thereafter. And typically, for whatever reason, I get to the SEC later. In this kind of conversation, in this context, I feel like the SEC would be a good place to start because there's a bunch of teams that I feel like need to have a better season, a significantly better season for various reasons. And alphabetically, I guess I will start with Arkansas. I feel like Arkansas needs a bounce back season. Gents, any thoughts on the Razorbacks?
I wrote in September 2022 an annual piece evaluating where third-year coaches are at that point in their tenure, because generally year three historically is when the rubber meets the road. So I wrote September 2022. Looking back, I wonder if September 2021, when Arkansas pummeled Texas at home and then they beat A&M for the first time in a while at Jerry World, I wrote, I wonder if September 2021 is going to be as good as it gets for the Sam Pittman era at Arkansas. And now, 2 years removed from that, we can definitely say that's the case. Arkansas is swimming upstream historically versus their rivals being in the rough and tumble SEC West. That's now gone. But yeah, he's the first to come to mind for just about everyone as someone that needs to have a good season. And bringing in Bobby Petrino, I think, is the best thing and the worst thing for Pittman's job security moving forward.
I couldn't agree more with you, particularly on that latter point, Zach. Arkansas opens its season with 3 of its first 5 games away from home, and those games are at Oak State, at Auburn, and neutral site against Texas A&M. And that all happens before the end of September. That could be a disastrous situation for the Hogs if things aren't going well, and you have a guy in Bobby Petrino that there was a lot of behind-the-scenes machinations to get him back as Arkansas's offensive coordinator. So you're 100% correct, Zach. I've known Sam Pittman since he was an offensive line coach at Tennessee. He's an awesome guy. I think people really like working for him. But this is a high-intensity, high-pressure year, and within that is an incredibly difficult opening five-week stretch, again, with 3 of those games not at home.
Well, so not only that, their first 5 games are in 5 different stadiums. I don't know. I couldn't tell you when the last time that's happened. I haven't researched it thoroughly, but I'd be willing to bet it's been a long time since that happened. And the Petrino thing, we in America love to build people down, and then we also love to forgive, and we love a redemption story. And if they start off poorly, the pull of getting public enemy number 1 at one time back in the big chair at Arkansas, it will be there, and you can't ignore it.
I'm looking at the schedule. So Pine Bluff, and then they go at Okie State, UAB, at Auburn, which will be quite a challenge, A&M, Tennessee, LSU, State, Ole Miss, Texas. I mean, golly.
Jeez. And they can easily lose to Oklahoma State, too. Oklahoma State's a top 20 team in the country.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Brushing that off,
Yeah, I'm not saying easily lose. They will be an underdog in that game.
A story that will resonate with no one. Brought my daughter up there to visit University of Arkansas on a little college tour not that long ago, and driving into Fayetteville, driving right onto campus, the very first person we saw was Bobby Petrino. I'm like, I mean, this is amazing. What are the odds of that? That was fantastic. Good story. Okay, I'm moving on to the Florida Gators. Billy Napier could really use a good season. And, his schedule is not that much fun either.
Oh, his schedule is worse overall than what Sam Pittman and Arkansas face. But those are probably neck and neck for potentially the 2 most brutal gauntlets in the SEC. But as we know, Florida opens at home against Miami. This is supposed to be Cristobal's best team. I like some of the things that Billy Napier has done at Florida. I've been impressed with how they've recruited, particularly amidst the speculation about how stable his situation is in Gainesville and the fact that they've lost some games that they very much should have won, especially in Napier's first year down in Florida, and that sort of set him behind last year. And there's just not as much equity there as what I think many of us believed would be there after they upset Utah early on in Billy Napier's tenure at Florida. So brutal season that has them opening with Miami. They've got Florida State on that schedule. They've obviously got Georgia not at home. They've got Texas A&M coming to the Swamp. They go to Mississippi State. They go to Tennessee, top 15 Tennessee. They've got Texas. I mean, it's just an unbelievable set of games facing what is not only, in my opinion, the toughest schedule this season in all of college football, but it's one of the toughest schedules in college football, I would contend, in this century.
Yeah, I don't think there's any argument to the contrary. I mean, you lose the SEC East, and so you're not playing. You lose Vanderbilt, you lose South Carolina, which normally would be counted as wins. You're still playing Kentucky, you're still playing Tennessee, you're still playing Georgia, and then from the West, you get A&M, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss. Along with Mississippi State. That's brutal. That would be brutal for anyone, but then you add in a non-conference of a Florida State that's back, a Miami, as you mentioned, that should be Cristobal's best team, and then you also get UCF at home, a team that could easily walk into the Swamp and beat you if you don't play well. So that would be difficult for anyone, but the added detail of getting Miami and UCF, your little brothers, at home and games you could easily lose. This is Let's put a positive spin on it. It's a great opportunity for Billy Napier to change the narrative around his program. And he talked at SEC Media Days. I wrote about this, about all the different ways that they're better, all the weight they've gained, all the weight they can lift, all the experience they bring back. Let's just say it's a great opportunity to prove people wrong.
So that we understand it's not hyperbole. I just did the math here, and that's always a dangerous proposition for me, especially before noon Eastern. But Florida plays 8 top 20 preseason teams. 8 top 20, not top 25, not top 30, not top 50. 8 top 20 teams. 8 top 20 teams. Absolute insanity for anyone. That would be insane for a program coming off singing Kumbaya and having the most static, stable situation in the world. That's not the case in Gainesville. 8 of the top 20, a great number of those games away from home. It's just unreal. Again, the pressure cooker, the pressure cooker is unbelievable, especially when you see Georgia receiving such an overwhelming majority of number one votes, having already won a couple of titles in recent years, should have been in the playoffs last year, on and on and on. I mean, Florida is just in this super precarious position, and Billy Napier, unfortunately, who I think is one of the best dudes in all of college football, he's at the tip of the spear.
I love that. Like, we're going to avoid the hyperbole. 8 out of the top 20. And then I'm like, isn't every year in the SEC West just have like 5 or 6 built in? They're in the top 20, and then you got, you also throw in Georgia and maybe Tennessee, who knows, on your schedule, and all of a sudden you got anyway. Whatever. It was cute that you guys both failed to mention Sanford and the Hatch Attack coming to town. Look out, boys!
Who's that one too? Oh my gosh!
If you're going to do that, I can't wait for Sanford and West Georgia opening the season, because I think that's going to be some of the most entertaining offense any of us will see the entire year. When you got Hatch, and he's a madman, and you got Dane Stevens, who I think is one of the really sharp young offensive coordinators who's trained under Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss and Seth Dagey and some of those guys, John David Baker. That's going to be a hell of an entertaining FCS game to get things started.
So looking at South Carolina for a second, last season, South Carolina, before November, they had one win against an FBS team, Mississippi State. They beat in Columbia. They then beat Jacksonville State, Vanderbilt, Kentucky, and they finished up with 5 total wins of the season. Shane Beamer's got he needs to course correct. Made some significant changes this offseason. Is South Carolina going to get better?
Better, yeah. I mean, I at SEC Media Days, I heard multiple coaches praise the way that they finished last season. Are they going to be good enough? I don't have a definitive answer as we sit here on August 13th.
Looking at the schedule, they got Kentucky, LSU, Ole Miss, Alabama, Oklahoma, A&M. I'll just skip over Vanderbilt, Missouri, and Clemson.
They also have 8 preseason top 20 teams on the ledger, 8 of them. So I talked to some folks in South Carolina this week, especially when we started thinking about doing this pod. And I said, what's the vibe? You know, how are things? And I think they really like what they've gotten done in camp so far. They're excited about Lenora Sellers. They've got the Harbor kid, who is an absolute flat-out freakazoid. But again, that schedule affords them no margin for error. This person said, I would not at all be surprised to see the Gamecocks go 8-4. I would absolutely not at all be surprised to see the Gamecocks go 4-8. The Gamecocks go 4-8. That's really, really, really bad news for Shane Beamer. Bad news Beamer if they go 4-8.
Their over under is 5.5 wins. I don't see any way Shane's back at 5.
Shane's got a lot of goodwill there, but needs to put up more skins in the board for sure. JB, I don't see 8. I see they got Old Dominion, Kentucky, Akron, and Wofford. And Vanderbilt. That's 5. Yeah, that's 7.
Oh, Kentucky. Okay, I had Kentucky ranked. I was giving Kentucky the respect it deserves. I had them as a preseason top 25 team. I can't help that others don't see that. So that's on me for considering Kentucky preseason top 25, as the Wildcats should be when the rest of America is sleeping on Mark Stoops' Big Blue Giants.
Texas A&M wasn't sleeping on them last year. Okay, moving along. The Vanderbilt Commodores have not been a very good football team. They brought in, very wisely, Jerry Kill to try and adjust. And Kill has been making some significant changes there. Can Vanderbilt do enough? I think they extended Clark Lee like every couple of years, despite they won one game last year. No, I'm sorry, one FBS game last year, and it was Hawaii, I think.
Yeah, they I believe they extended Clark right at the onset of last season. That was coming off of a 5-win 2022 campaign where you felt like, okay, there's signs here of building towards progress, of maybe being a 5-7, 6-6, 7-5 ceiling type program, and then they backslid all the way, as you noted, to 2 wins, only one of which was an FBS win. But Clark Lee, you want to talk about goodwill? He's the hometown kid. He played there. He's done fantastic work getting some alignment at the university and also getting some fundraising. He was huge, and I believe what is an ongoing around $300 million athletics project at Vanderbilt. He was very much a linchpin in that. 0-12 is super bad news for Clark, and 2-10 probably is. But if there's improvement, I think that Clark gets another year because of all the equity that he has, even without the wins necessarily having contributed to that equity.
Yeah, this is a deeper conversation that we don't have time for right now. But what are fair expectations for Vanderbilt in this day and age? Obviously, it's not 2 wins, but at the same time, it's not 9 wins. The James Franklin era was lightning in a bottle. That's unlikely to happen again. So, what is fair expectations for Vanderbilt?
Why do you say that? Why James Franklin era was fantastic. It got the university moving again athletically. You got NIL is wide open. Vanderbilt's an incredible university in one of the hottest towns in America. Why can't they go out and get the best of the best?
Well,
Tennessee was down at that time. Florida was down at that time. Georgia was good, but they weren't the juggernaut. Obviously, you're not playing an SEC East schedule anymore, so you're going to get more more Alabama, more LSU, more Texas, Oklahoma than you previously would have gotten. I mean, in a lot of ways, they're 16th out of 16 in that conference in terms of resources.
Yeah, they might be in the best city in the conference. Depends on your preference. Nashville obviously is a great city. You might just prefer a smaller college town. Regardless, they're in, as Scott noted, they're in one of the it cities in America, but it's been an it city or emerging as an it city for 15 to 20 years. Only Franklin was able to capitalize on that. To Zach's very astute point, while there were a bunch of other people down, Tennessee was in unprecedented turmoil, transitioning from Fulmer to Kiffin to Dooley to Butch to university presidents to ADs to on and on. And also Vanderbilt might have played Alabama one time the entire time James Franklin was at the helm of the Commodore ship. So that's significant. Georgia was good, but Mark Richt never quite got them to play for a national championship. Tennessee, like I said, was in disarray. Mark Stoops hadn't arrived yet at Kentucky until 2012. Kentucky had been a disaster with the end of Rich Brooks transitioning into Joker Phillips. On and on and on. South Carolina was getting towards getting out, I guess. Steve Spurrier was doing some good things there. But again, they benefited from the state of the rest of the SEC in addition to having a iron-willed force in James Franklin that just sort of forced people to come aboard his vision. And it hasn't been the same since then. And to your point, Scott, you're right. They should be able to NIL the hell out of some dudes and get that program better, but they haven't proved willing to do that.
All right, good transition to the Big Ten with James Franklin. So in the SEC, there were some teams we were talking about who they need a good season, to get things going again and to ensure some consistency. The Big Ten feels a little different. James Franklin, Ryan Day come to mind for slightly different reasons, but lofty expectations. Let's stick with James Franklin. It's a program that some people thought could beat Michigan, could have had their season last year, didn't. Expanded playoff. If they weren't to make the playoffs this year, that would be a huge concern, right?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think the barometer for them this year is making the playoff. And they've been close. If it was a 12-team playoff a couple of years ago, I think Penn State would have been in there. Probably a decent shot. They would have been in there last year in a 12-team playoff. So they have to make sure they're firmly entrenched in the middle of that. Because you don't want to be the 12th team, because if you're the number 12 team, you lose your spot almost certainly to the G5 team. So you need to really be in the top 11 to feel like you're going to be safe come Selection Sunday. To me, Penn State, the bare minimum they have to do is be in the playoffs. And really, if you're Penn State, you want to be seated between 5 and 8 so that you get that home game.
Yeah, the other day I called Ole Miss a paper tiger program, and at least Ole Miss beat Penn State in the Peach Bowl. Like we ought to change the name to the Penn State Paper Lions. I mean, when's the last time this team beat someone that really knocked your socks off? I can think of 2016 Ohio State with the blocked field goal return. That team went on to win the Big Ten, was left out of the playoff because they had 2 losses. And since then, they've done a fantastic job of beating the crap out of Maryland and Rutgers and Indiana, and they're consistently short against Michigan and Ohio State and even Ole Miss. It feels like for years and years and years and years, we've heard, all right, this is the quarterback that's going to take Penn State. Trace McSorley was a quintessential great college quarterback. There's been like 3 other dudes since then. They're like, all right, this is James Franklin's guy. And they're all various versions of the same person. They've had great individual talent. I feel like we've heard 3 or 4 different times this is James Franklin's best team. Had some close calls with the Saquon Barkley team. They had Micah Parsons. Weren't able to get over the hump. And at this point, it's just like, even if they do make the playoff, they can go 10-2, lose to Michigan and Ohio State. I don't have their schedule in front of me, so they might not be playing one of those 2 teams. Forgive me if they're not. But I want to see this team beat someone with a pulse, and that hasn't happened in almost a decade.
All right, so here, you don't have their schedule handy, but I was checking it out. So they open at West Virginia, which West Virginia had a nice resurgence last year. Penn State, West Virginia used to be a fairly salty rivalry. I'm excited to see this game renewed. if they win that opener at West Virginia, there's almost no chance that Penn State is not 5-0, then going into a 3-game stretch that features at USC, at Wisconsin, and home against Ohio State. So if Penn State is 1-0, then by the time that three-game slate hits, we'll know everything we need to know about Penn State before the end of October.
I mean, if they're 8-0, pretty good shot to make playoffs.
Yes.
Yeah, if they're 8-0, because then they've got Washington at Purdue. Purdue's going to be terrible. At Minnesota, and then home against Maryland to close it out. So aside from that 3-game stretch, they're in really great shape. I mean, if they go 2-1 in that 3-game stretch, I would expect Penn State to be 11-1. If Penn State's 11-1, they're either playing for the Big Ten or they're probably the number 5 seed and hosting a game.
So before we put a ball on this, my bar for Penn State is to win a playoff game, be in that top 8, win a playoff game.
Yeah, I mean, Penn State never made the 14 playoff. When's the last time it was a factor in the BCS before that? I don't think that – I think making – you're right, Zach. It should be – the barometer should be they need to win. I think for this year, it's getting in. Next year, it becomes, okay, you made it. Now you have to win a game.
They got, Drew Aller's back. I feel like a year they should –
Nick Singleton.
Well, I hear you.
Nick Singleton might be the best running back in college football. He's really, really good.
All right, lofty expectations. Ryan Day is in a maybe even more. Like Urban did it. Hey Ryan, go do it, buddy. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's an absolute pressure cooker season for Ryan Day. No question. They probably have the most expensive roster in all of college football, and they're right up there for having the most expensive coaching roster in all of college football. Between what Ryan Day himself makes, Chip Kelly now is OC, Jim Knowles is DC. I think you're sitting on almost $15 million in coaches' salaries just between those 3 dudes. Then their NIL salary for this year has been reported as 15 to 16 million. So they might be the most expensive team in college football this year. You darn well better be a playoff team if that's the case, and you better be getting a bye or, at worst case scenario, hosting as the 5 seed with a clear path forward from there.
I'm going to read a couple quotes. Quote, as of now, this is one of the most talented rosters in the last decade, maybe ever. I mean, that's a big statement. They've got to play. But you look at the quality of athlete at every position, I've never seen anything like it, end quote. So that's Urban Meyer, king of hyperbole, but is he wrong? Next quote. I don't know if I've ever seen that many great players in that building all at once. Every position, every place you turn. That's Jim Tressel, not a man prone to hyperbolic statements. So that's Ryan Day's 2 predecessors, I think, priming the fan base to blame Ryan Day if this team falls short of expectations. This is a team that I think compares only to the 2011 Miami Heat in terms of expectations and quality of talent assembled. As John mentioned, this is the most expensive roster in college football history. I think we can safely say that. They spent to bring back a lot of guys that would have gone to the draft in previous era, brought in a great recruiting class, the number 1 player in the country, Jeremiah Smith, who's just absolutely wowing people at receiver, brought in the best transfer class in college football, pound for pound, Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Downs, Will Howard. There's no excuses. There's no place for Ryan Day to go and hide. It's on him at this point. So I think a promise has been made to the Ohio State fan base, not in any one specific terms, but I think a promise of a win over Michigan and at minimum a berth in the championship game has been promised to the Ohio State fan base, and there's going to be hell to pay if they fall short of both of those things. Does that mean Ryan Day gets fired? I'm not saying that, but there's never been a coach under this much of a pressure cooker in college football.
Their schedule sets up really overall very nicely as well. I mean, they should absolutely be 5-0 by the time they go to Oregon. that Oregon game no longer becomes an eliminator contest. It becomes potentially a preview of the Big Ten championship game. And then they got Penn State a little later than that. And then they obviously wrap up with Michigan, but they don't have a stretch where they play those killer back-to-back games like we just talked about Penn State having, or like we talked about some of those SEC teams having. So the schedule, while it is overall a little more difficult perhaps for Ohio State this year, it sets up very favorably from an outline standpoint.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to transition us to Nebraska. Totally different situation. Year 2, Matt Rule. Year 1, they started to pull some things together. This year, traditionally, year 2, you're going to see a significant step forward. They start off favorable, I would say, with the schedule. UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa. Hopefully, the Huskers are 3-0. Then they go Illinois, Purdue, Rutgers, Indiana. You could see them 5 wins at that point, maybe 6 wins, maybe. Ohio State, UCLA, USC, Wisconsin, Iowa. Can they get to 7 or 8 wins?
I think
All right,
so.
let me ask the next question. If they don't, if they are sub 500, if they don't make a bowl again, does it kind of break the back?
I think that's a fair question. Matt Rule's not. He has a big contract. They're not going to. I don't think move on from him if they
No.
But
No.
I mean, you saw the clip that made the rounds that John wrote about for us, and it's just it's a what has it been now? 7 straight losing seasons at Nebraska, and that has just crept into the walls of a program that was for a generation the biggest winner in college football. And Matt Rule is a culture guy through and through, and if he can't flip that culture with how much he's also flipped the staff, flipped the roster, it's going to be pulling your hair out, banging your head against your desk type frustration for Nebraska to even, get to 6 wins, get to a bowl game. You'd think would be, there's how many bowl games, and Nebraska can't find a way to get there because they can't do the little things to win these close games that they keep losing over and over and over again.
Here's much like Scott's useless story about seeing Bobby Petrino when he went up to Vietnam and visited campus there. I'm going to share with you the fact that the last time Nebraska made a bowl game, I was the sideline reporter in said Music City Bowl. That's been a hell of a long time since I've been pacing sidelines with a microphone in my hand. That was to close off the 2016 season, the halcyon days of Frank Solich at Nebraska. Derek Barnett breaking Reggie White's all-time sack record at the University of Tennessee in that contest. Butch Jones having underachieved but won 9 games in consecutive seasons, only for the wheels to completely fall off on Rocky Top the next year. But that's a really long time. Then you bring it all the way to the front, and because I wrote about this last night, the stats handy on my head, they're 3-20 guys in their last 23 games decided by single digits. And you think, okay, that's a stretch of bad luck. No. That's only going back 3 seasons that they're 3-20. So kudos for being in a hell of a lot of games. But how much different is the perception of Nebraska if they're just 11-12? If they're just 11 wins and 12 losses in those 23 games instead of 3? How close were they last year? They were so close. 2 years ago, I think they were 0-9 in games decided by 9 or fewer points. Just unbelievable misery. But I do think that there'll be a bowl team this year. Matt Rule traditionally has been able to engineer significant jumps in his second year in various programs. I think the schedule sets up very nicely for them. I think they honestly, if they're worse than 5-2 when they play Ohio State, then they're in really bad shape. Then you start talking about another season that has gotten away from Nebraska. But I do think they've got a chance to be 5-2, 6-1 when they get to that Ohio State game. And then I think we all believe that UCLA is certainly going to be a different animal that takes a step back this year. Not that they were just elite under Chip Kelly, but I just don't see any way that UCLA doesn't step back. And then they've got the tough close with at USC and at Iowa sandwiched around their home finale against Wisconsin, which also in its own right has a big season ahead of it in year 2 for Luke Fickell.
Just a quick correction for JB. That was a Mike Riley coach Nebraska team.
That's right. That's right. Good job.
And that 3-20 number is astounding. And it's week in, week out, they're losing games 23-17. They've just been anemic offensively because they've been substandard at quarterback play. Last year they had Jeff Sims, who's just not a Power 4 starting quarterback. Sounds like Dylan Raiola, the true freshman, is going to get handed the keys immediately. He was a number 2 recruit. I have talked to a source who knows quarterback play a lot better than I do, who said that he's just not a believer in Dylan Raiola. So I guess we'll see. We'll see. A lot rides on a position of a true freshman.
If you guys haven't seen it, John Bryce wrote an article on footballscoop.com last night. It was a video clip from a recent practice, I guess, where fans were there. I don't know if it was a scrimmage or whatever. And Rule's getting on his guys. And what I heard Rule say was, in the first drive, our seniors went and sat on the bench, like they tapped out. Huh? I don't know all the context, but that's.
You could tell he was sickened by that, and that's a body language thing. I'm sure that's as much a body language thing as anything. And he's wondering, what are these guys conditioned to that they play a series in a fan day scrimmage and go parking on the bench while the next series is going on? Like, unless they were sitting on the bench and a coordinator had them huddled around, and that sure didn't sound like that from Matt Rule's words, then he was positively disgusted. I will give Matt Rule a lot of credit because he was careful to say, you want to know why we lose around here? He made sure to say we. He inherited a bunch of that losing. But he said we instead of you. I do think that was important leadership from Matt Rule.
All right, gentlemen, we're 30 minutes in. I got plenty of time. You guys are college football experts. You guys got people drawing on your time all the time. You got time to keep going?
We might as well.
Let's rock. Big 12. Baylor Bears. They put it on the shirt. They put it on the shirt. We pay players. Coming off, I think, a 3-win season. How much better does Baylor need to be, or else that becomes embarrassing?
Yeah, when I was making a list after we settled on this podcast topic yesterday, and I was making lists for this morning's podcast, when I typed Dave Aranda's name, it included like exclamation points after it. Like, I think that's about as effectively as I can convey it. I think he has to win 6+ games to feel any sort of stability and potential to get more time there and to try building. I think 2 or 3 years ago, we thought Dave Aranda was going to do a really nice job and have that being a program that could win 8, 9, 10 games a year, maybe lose a game it shouldn't, but also always notch some sort of signature upset. And instead, Zach might have the high water mark for Baylor's program under Aranda. Maybe he's got that handy the way he did for Pittman and Arkansas. But I remember him writing that column 2 years ago, and he was 100% on the money for the Hogs. I wonder what that point would be for Baylor. But whatever that point was, they've spent all the time since then trying to recapture it.
Yeah, you go back to
21.
Yeah,
right?
they were Big 12 champions.
Yeah,
they had Big 12 champions, beat Ole Miss in the Sugar Bowl. I mean, that team was a tough football team that I don't care who you are, you didn't want to play that team. And it's been an egregious backslide since then. To Dave's credit, he made a drastic move after his first season of 2020. Moving on from Larry Fedora as offense coordinator, bringing in Jeff Grimes, worked immediately. Moved on from Jeff Grimes, brought in Jake Spavital. They're going to go to an air raid system. Brought in Daquan Finn, quarterback from Toledo, MAC Player of the Year. So they should be really good at that position. I think he's in a similar spot to Clark Lee at Vanderbilt, to Sam Pittman at Arkansas, where everyone there likes him, wants him to succeed. Clearly, they're helping him to the extent that they can succeed, evidenced by those shirts. But at the same time, they're not going to ride him all the way down to rock bottom. So he needs to do his part, and I think 6 wins is the minimum for Baylor this fall.
I'm with you, but yes, I'm with you. I think it should be more than that, to be honest. And I think they have significant potential. Just got to see it. Big 12, gentlemen. I'm not sure that I see another team that I feel like has just got to do significantly better. I don't know that I see the huge ramifications of a bad season for anybody here.
Can I just throw one in there, just in the,
Yep.
in the
Yeah.
name of it's time to produce that, and that's for me, Joey McGuire at Texas Tech. They've done a lot of really good things. I think he's hired a really good staff that most of them are still with him. In recruiting, they are really, really good at evaluating Texas high school prospects. They are first on a lot of kids that end up becoming national recruits. They sign their fair share. I mean, they've got Micah Hudson, 5-star receiver, as the highest rated wide receiver recruit they've probably ever had. They've gone heavily on speed. They should be one of the fastest teams in college football this season, but they haven't seriously contended for a Big 12 championship. You go back to big moments when they beat Texas in 22. McGuire said the Big 12 runs through Lubbock. Well, the Big 12 has not run through Lubbock. This is a program that's consistently won 7, 8, 9 games, but has not contended for a Big 12 championship. And I think it's in a conference that's going to be incredibly wide open. It's time for them to contend for a Big 12 championship.
I'll tell you one more, and I think everyone here on the podcast, and I'll go ahead and speak for Doug on this one as well. A guy we all love is Kalani Sitake at BYU. But I think he's got a really big year in front of him this year, especially after slumping to a 5-7 season a year ago, missing the postseason, stumbling after a solid start, stumbling in their first year in the Big 12. Now this year, they get Southern Illinois to open up with, but then they've got a couple of tough roadies at SMU and then at Wyoming. And Wyoming, not a conference game, but obviously a regional rivalry. Wyoming always plays tough, hard-nosed defense. You don't know what the weather's going to be in Laramie. It can snow the third week in September. It snowed in June and July in Wyoming. So you don't know about the weather. Not that BYU is not accustomed to the cold. I just think there are a number of factors there. It's a really, really big year for Kalani Sitake and the BYU Cougars. And you could argue it takes on a little bit more magnitude because BYU basketball has had a nice run, and BYU just lost its head coach to Kentucky, Mark Pope, as the replacement to John Calipari. So there's that much more focus on needing football to be good.
Yeah, getting Utah in the conference is similar to Texas A&M and Texas joining the conference. Different dynamic, but it's like, all right, our rivals joined our conference. It sure would be heck of a good thing to beat these guys.
Yeah, and that game is at Utah. So the 35-mile ride for BYU from Provo to Rice-Eccles Stadium.
All right, shifting to the ACC. I think there's a couple of fun things in here for different reasons why I like to see a coach have a good season. Mario Cristobal starts off at Florida and then has a season. You know, it's a very, very, very manageable season in my opinion. It would be fun to see Mario's team go off because I think he's got the potential. Will they do it?
Yeah, I mean, here in Dallas Cowboys country, it's a cliche to say that Jerry, the owner, needs to fire Jerry, the GM. Well, when you watch Miami football, you think Mario, the recruiter, Mario, the program manager, needs to fire Mario, the game day head coach, because there's often so many times. I remember watching their bowl game when they lost to Rutgers. I don't have the play-by-play in front of me, but there's just Mario is not putting his team in the best chance to win by how he manages the game. Obviously, they blew that game against Georgia Tech in an unforgivable fashion. So the biggest limiter on their own program to me is their head coach's game management on game day.
Yeah, and Cam Ward, they bring him in. He was sensational at Incarnate Word, put up huge numbers at Wazoo, but now it's the third stop for him. They do have a guy that in a year will be a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, and Francis Mauigoa, I hope I pronounced that correctly, the left tackle stud, Francis Mauigoa. So they've got a great anchor to their offensive line. They've got a dynamic player at quarterback. They've recruited well. They've portaled well. Now it's time to put it all together on the field. But again, you know, Miami can certainly go win at Florida to open the season, but you don't get any sort of warm up to test yourself with this new conductor at quarterback and moving forward from there. So it's a tough one.
I think he's got two really good coordinators who will do a lot of the on-field stuff other than clock management. So we'll see. I think they have huge potential this year. I'm excited to see how they do. All right, for a different reason, I think Mac Brown really needs to beat NC State. North Carolina's been fine. They've been fine. They haven't been amazing. They've been fine. They got to beat NC State. It's becoming an issue.
I think fine is the operative word for Mac 2.0 at North Carolina. He got there. His first years, it seems like, were his best years, pulling Sam Howell from Florida State, a big recruiting win early. He was a franchise player. You had Drake May, who's a better, at least in the NFL's eyes, a much better quarterback than Sam Howell. And that team just did not live up to expectations or potential. So, yeah, I think Dave Doran's shown remarkable longevity at NC State and has the potential to take the entire state from the Tar Heels.
Yeah, and North Carolina's the flagship school. They've got all the Jordan swag. They've had two first-round quarterbacks in MAC 2.0, as you call it. I call it the reboot, and they haven't even played for an ACC title in that time, I don't believe. So they haven't made that leap. They've had some other sensational skill players as well on both sides of the ball, but they have not been able to put it all together to be a gritty, tough team that has won some of the games it has needed to win. And now you've got NC State back in the both preseason top 25s. You got other people that you got to deal with, like Clemson, to Zach's point, maybe flying under the radar, negligently so this year, as a chance to have a huge bounce back season. So there's a lot of things working against Mac. I love Mac being so forceful and saying, well, I've been retiring for 4 years now, according to everybody else, and we just keep winning. Well, not quite winning enough. So that's an excellent point by you, Scott. He's one of the ones I had identified as needing a big year for multiple reasons at North Carolina. I'm curious to see where you go next in the ACC, if it's who I think you'll pick.
Well, I got a few in the ACC. I definitely want to talk about Pitt. Yes, last year was just rough. He cleaned house. How much ropes he got. The AD really likes him. But, I think they had like 2 or 3 wins last year. It was bad. Whole new staff. The new staff there's some gambling on. I say gambling. There's some guys. He didn't go with the older, proven veterans. He wants some youthful energy, and we need that to pay off early, I would think. Yeah,
they were 3-9 a year ago, and one of those wins might have been against an FCS team. I can't recall, but just 3-9, lost to a dreadful Cincinnati team, which we're already out of the Big 12 conversation. But Satterfield has to have a big year for Cincinnati. And when you look at the Bearcats schedule, it's hard to see 6 wins. But anyway, we're talking about Pat Narduzzi and Pitt. They've got West Virginia on the schedule again. They've got Cincinnati on the schedule again, in addition to their ACC slate. And he went with some guys that play some exciting ball. Bell, I think, is the offensive coordinator. And he does some really innovative, fun things. But you're right. He's making the leap, and he needs it to be a big-time leap, because just a few years ago, Bell was at the D2 level and then went FCS. And now he's all the way up to not only FBS, but Power 4 FBS.
Yeah, so that's 31-year-old Cade Bell, who was at Western Carolina, at Tusculum, called plays at Valdosta State. But as of now, his only year at the Power 4 at the FBS level is a year off the field job at South Florida for the 2019 season. So Pat Narduzzi's bet big on him, and it could be great. But, you're getting into year 10, where if they have another year like they did last year, you're at the point where it's like, all right, it's probably better for the players and alumni donors to hear a new voice.
Well, he won that ACC in 2021 with Pickett. Should have played for the title again in 22 and had a couple of games get away from them. And also, I believe 22 is when they lost to Western Michigan, a game that really cost them, I think, some long-term equity. And then obviously last year was just a huge backslide. They had lost a ton of key talented players to the NFL draft. They had a couple of injuries, and it spiraled out of control early, and they were terrible on offense. And Pat Narduzzi saying a couple of weeks ago, we wrote when he explained about Corey Sanders and why he's the assistant head coach, what he looks for in that role. He pretty much said his offense last year, the staff didn't communicate with him, and they were just a bunch of yes men and never told him or had real discussions with him. He feels like he's rectified that. We'll see on the field if they've rectified that. But a big year for Pat Narduzzi. I would contend he's got about the biggest season in front of him of any ACC coach.
And he's got an extremely manageable schedule. First four: Kent State, Cincinnati, West Virginia, Youngstown. You got to find at least 2 wins, probably 3. Then you got North Carolina, Cal, Syracuse. Okay, we'll pick up a couple of wins there. SMU is going to be a good team.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got Virginia, Clemson, Louisville, BC. Transition year at BC. Transition year at Syracuse. There should be a bunch of wins here.
Yeah.
Should.
Yeah, we should be talking in November. We should be talking about how Pittsburgh is among the teams with the greatest win gain year over year. They should probably be a +5 win game team when the season's shaking down the stretch in November.
Agreed. There's a few more ACC teams I want to talk about. I'm going to jump to Tony Elliott in Virginia. Terrible circumstances. When the player got shot. Tony's had a lot to deal with. Tony is so ready for a new season, a fresh slate. Let's get it going. Virginia needs to put some wins on the board, some meaningful wins on the board.
They do, and they showed improvement last year. They lost some heartbreaking games. They had James Madison beat and just kind of found a way to lose that game, and that's the next step for them. I have seen on-field progress from them, but now the name of the game is the win-loss column. We have to see that on-field progress transfer over to the win-loss column. And in addition to seeing Virginia Tech back on the rise and that staff doing a really nice job, Virginia also adds Notre Dame to its schedule as part of the ACC's scheduling cooperative, and that's a late November trip to South Bend.
How about Justin Wilcox at Cal? A whole new world for Cal. They're like, hey, we're just going to put our hand in the dirt and go play. We don't know much about these teams. Obviously, we'll scout them. But this is a new world, and it's hard to know from afar the commitment from the top at Cal. It's a different dynamic than at a lot of places. Certainly very different than a lot of ACC football teams.
Yeah, I think it's big year. Go ahead, Zach. Sorry.
Zach, you might be muted.
I think you.
Sorry about that. I was giving you guys absolute gold here. So previously, the biggest fish out of water in college football, in my opinion, was Rutgers out of the Big Ten. But this is just 10 miles beyond that, in my opinion. And you hit the nail on the head. What is the commitment from the top in Berkeley? What is Cal football in the minds of people where Cal football matters to? And then asking them to compete against a conference 3,000 miles away. It's hard to say Cal football has ever been humming under Justin Wilcox, but it's also hard to say what does this program look like in 2024 when it is humming.
And don't they have a very early season trip to Auburn? In addition to now joining the ACC and therefore ratcheting up the quality of competition they're going to face. But I think Wilcox has a pretty hefty buyout. They had extended him a couple of years ago. I would have to check my records again, but I think his buyout going into last year was in the $20 million range. So Cal doesn't I don't sense that Cal
really
wants to throw that kind of money away. I've got it somewhere. I'll try to clarify when we add the written piece to this, but it was a bigly number.
So my recollection is pre-COVID, Justin Wilcox had built the program pretty good. I think they had gotten up 7-8 wins, and then COVID just especially in the state of California, right? It just messed everything up. Set the program back for sure. But this year, so this is, COVID was 2020, so you got 21, 22, 23. This is year 4 post-COVID. It's got a tough schedule, man. You mentioned at Auburn early. At Florida. I mean, you go home, you play Auburn, then you go home, have San Diego State, then you got to come right back. I mean, week to week to week at Tallahassee for Florida State. Then you got Miami at Pitt, NC State, Oregon State, at Wake, Syracuse, Stanford, SMU. It's not an easy schedule for these guys. We'll see. All right, JB, in the ACC, who else were you thinking?
Those were the primary ones. I'm taking a quick look here at my list that I had.
I think we're good there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
right.
I think we're good there.
I really had not even taken a look at Group of 5. Do you guys want to talk about anybody else in particular? We're running an hour on here.
No, we might revisit this. I think this has been a good one. We've missed Doug, but this might be a podcast that we turn into a quarterly series this year or something. Yeah, we might do this once a month and just gauge the pressure volume at some of these spots.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I think we're all cheering for good seasons for these guys. There's a lot of really good humans, good football coaches, good men, good leaders. You just want to see them get things going right. So, football is near, gentlemen. 2 weeks. I saw Mike Norvell was jumping out of his shoes yesterday. He was so excited. They're 2 weeks to game time.
Boom. I'm more organized than I give myself credit for, and I usually don't deserve much in the way of credit for organization. But last year, Justin Wilcox's buyout at Cal was $20.3 million. So that was in the middle of the 23 season that buyout number was done. So you have to figure it's still, 15, 16 million now. But that's the list we've got. I trust this list immensely. And
why would anybody do that?
$20.3 million. And
what is the athletic director thinking when he does that?
Yeah, that's
a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
So there we go.
All right, gentlemen. Football Scoop Podcast. Great seeing you guys. I appreciate the time. We will talk soon.
Peace.